This episode, I'm speaking with Amity Warme. Amity is an elite climber, a registered dietitian with a master's in sports nutrition. On top of that, she's tackled some of the hardest big wall climbing challenges in the world. That includes climbing Yosemite's famous Freerider in just one day and the Book of Hate. This episode was incredibly exciting because Amity walked me through how she went from a background in gymnastics to finding rock climbing to becoming an elite rock climber and then becoming an elite big wall climber. We talked about how she tackles fear, chooses climbing partners, and of course covered some nutrition topics. If you're interested in climbing and climbing hard, this is a great podcast for you. So let's get into it. My impression of you is you are entirely fearless because I'm seeing these photos of you doing big wall climbing and it makes my palms sweaty immediately seeing you so high up with just a finger crack. How do you get into climbing? And then why are you drawn to what I see as like one of the scariest sides of climbing?
I am for sure not fearless. I'm
Oh, you've
actually
fooled me.
definitely like not a very bold climber in terms of like I'm really not willing to risk things where I'm potentially going to get injured, like because of something that I could have done differently.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, there's one climb in particular, the Book of Hate, where you climb with an injury.
Yeah, so that's a bit more of a story than just that climb, I guess.
Yeah.
I climbed that entire Yosemite season with that finger injury, so I had done the entire route on El Cap, that Pineapple Express, with that injury, and then did Book of Hate. But at the time, didn't know that it was a pulley rupture or an injury of that significance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was not that I knew that I was climbing through that significant of an injury, I guess.
And maybe you could talk about your athletic background. So you were in gymnastics. How do you get introduced to climbing in general?
Yeah, so I did gymnastics from like 6 years old to 17. Like that was my entire childhood. I was at the gym from 3 to 8:30 every day, pretty much like 5 hours a day, most days of the week. And
Oh
then,
my gosh. And what events
yeah,
would you do?
what was that?
What events did you do in gymnastics?
All the like typical women's events, so like vault bars, beam floor.
Yep.
So yeah, that was my like entire childhood through high school. And then I fractured my back my junior year of high school. And that was the end of the gymnastics career. But I've always been like super active, a ton of energy. Like I really need this like big physical outlet for my energy. So kind of didn't have that for a long time after gymnastics. And then when I went to college, there was a little like small rock climbing wall on the campus that I went to. And I ended up working there and like immediately got into rock climbing there.
So is just kind of happenstance you stumbled into this climbing gym at your university?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, the university that I went to does this like freshman welcome week every year, and they happen to have like an outdoor adventure one in Colorado. And the school I went to is actually in Texas, Baylor University in Texas, but they have this like outdoor adventure like freshman welcome week in Colorado. And I did that because I was living in Colorado at the time.
Yeah.
And um yeah, I like kind of there's like one day of rock climbing and I loved it and they like recruited me to come like to the rock wall on campus when I got there in the fall and yeah.
So in my head, it's like you're in your recruitment event, you touch the wall, and angelic noises start playing, and you realize like this is it. I found my new gymnastics. This is my new thing. I'm gonna dump hours and hours into.
It wasn't quite that um immediate of a transition, I guess. Like I got into it, like I was really psyched on it. I loved it, but I was still very much along the lines of like your typical American like trajectory of like going to school and getting a job and all of that. I had no idea climbing was this thing that I could like spend the majority of my time and life doing. So it was yeah, super recreational for like quite a few years.
Yeah. Did you have friends that were into the hobby as well, or were you one of the people trying to do like climbing missionary work, pulling people in to climb with you?
No, I think yeah, through like working at that rock wall and like that was how I met several friends, I guess.
Yeah. And could you
Yeah.
talk to how you make, I think it's a big transition to go from indoor climbing to outdoor.
Yeah, for sure. I actually met Connor, who is my husband now, and he had grown up climbing. He also worked at this little rock wall on campus, but he had grown up rock climbing his whole life and gone outside. Um, so he was the one that kind of like took me outside initially and taught me how to place trad gear and do all of that. So that was kind of how I got into it outdoors.
So you got into it right away with trad gear?
Um, yeah, kind of like super easy, but
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. I don't know how you can say I think of you as fearless then. I think trad is like of the spectrum of getting into outdoor climbing on the more scary end.
I mean, if you're doing it right, it shouldn't be dangerous. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like way easier to get hurt bouldering than it is trad climbing.
Yeah, yeah. True. Good point. Yeah, so what were like some of your early memories for early climbing trips? Were they all done in college?
Yeah, so yeah, we were in like Central Texas for college. There's not exactly destination rock climbing there, but
Hmm.
we would drive like, and I don't know, a couple hours most weekends to go to this little like granite dome, like yeah, tiny little rock climbing place in Central Texas called Enchanted Rock.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of where I learned how to place gear and yeah, all of that.
Was that a pretty common weekend date activity for you and Connor to go climb together?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we went like pretty much every weekend that like my sophomore year of college.
Yeah. Why do you think climbing and like a relationship is such a force multiplier for friendships and relationships?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see this a ton in like all my climbing, like important climbing partnerships. I think it's like it's just such or it can be such an like intense experience where especially with like the big walls and or like big multi pitches or whatever, it's like you're both living this like pretty intense experience together and like experiencing the same thing and kind of going through all those like highs and lows of emotions and physical output and sensations and all of those things together. And I think that can be really both like just living those things together, but also like supporting the other person through those is really powerful in terms of, yeah, partnership and bonding.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And talking of like the range of emotions and that full spectrum, is that something that drew you to climbing more than other sports? Like, was that something that gymnastics had satisfied you with? Like, was there a fear in gymnastics you can conquer, or is that introduced to you through climbing?
Yeah. Um, I think I've actually gotten a lot better at dealing with fear and like the mental side of sport through climbing than I ever was in gymnastics. And maybe it's just because I'm older and I've matured more, but I've also like been pretty intentional about working on kind of the mental side of performance and yeah, fear management and all of that in recent years. And I think maybe I just didn't have like the tools or resources to do that when I was in gymnastics. Yeah. But I do
Yeah.
think it is like a really interesting aspect of climbing.
When you say tools and resources, do you do what does that mean when you're on a wall getting nervous? What sort of things do you do to calm yourself down?
Yeah. Um I kind of think just trying to like take a step back from like remove yourself emotionally from the situation if you can of like trying to look at it a bit more objectively of like okay, is there an actual risk here or am I just building it up in my head? Um and then I don't know, I have like mantras that I say to myself when I'm in a situation that I'm like stressed or scared or like performance anxiety or whatever and I think that is can be pretty helpful.
Yeah. Is there a Goldilocks zone for you in climbing in terms of like I need it to be the perfect spook factor and difficulty and like is there are you at a point now where you're just looking to push yourself and you don't really want that middle ground anymore?
No, I think I mean, I spend so much of my time climbing. It's like pretty nice to have that variety of like, there's times when it's nice to just go clip really well bolted sport routes and just have a
Yeah.
really like type one fun day out. And there's times
Yep.
when it's cool to like choose to engage in this like bigger, more intimidating adventure type of climbing.
Yeah, definitely. Um, in climbing in general, I find lends itself to obsession pretty readily. Like especially compared to other sports, I feel like there's not as much burnout with climbing. I don't know. It just seems like more routinely fun than other sports. Even practicing feels fun.
Yeah.
Is that an experience you share?
Yeah, definitely. I don't really feel like struggling with burnout has ever been an issue for me.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, a pretty like psyched person in general, and I think especially with climbing, like there's so many disciplines, there's so many like niche disciplines within disciplines that there's like you really like can't get bored with it. Like if you're getting bored with climbing, like just look to like the next I don't know, little like niche discipline and like there's always going to be something to learn and I think that like for me that's one of the things that really is compelling about climbing is like there's always something harder or bigger or better style or something new to learn. Like I'm never gonna have like made it in the sport. Like there's always something more for me to do. I think that is really cool.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of making it a sport, like you did Freerider in a day. Could you talk to me about what that prep was like and or how did that one get on your radar first?
Yeah, yeah, that was actually like a couple years ago. So Brent Bargon and I, who we've yeah done quite a few like big things together in terms of climbing objectives. We like I don't know happened to meet at the crag. I guess back in like 2020, just like cross paths, chatted a little bit, and then yeah, hadn't really climbed together or anything. The next year, we were both in Yosemite, and we just climbed like a couple single pitches together one day and chatted a bit more. And then we were both on the Nugget podcast, I guess, like kind of back to back episodes, and had listened to each other's. And I had messaged him like because he had in his he had talked about trying Freerider in a day, like with in this whole style of like no rehearsal, no stashing, all of that. He
Sorry to
talked about
interrupt. Could you say what each of those mean?
yeah, yeah. So like stashing, like most of the time when people are climbing an LCAP route in a day, they are either going up from the ground or wrapping in from above and stashing like food and water and supplies at different points along the route so that you don't have to carry it with you. And then rehearsing would just be like dialing in, practicing those crux pitches to make sure you have them like completely wired so that you're not doing them multiple times since you're trying to do the whole thing in a day. And then like self-supported was like we didn't have someone jogging up behind us or meeting us halfway up the route with supplies or whatever. Like we just were
Mhm.
carrying, like we walked up to the base with everything we needed, clipped to our harnesses, and went rock climbing. Like, yeah, about as simple as it gets.
Right.
But also like incredibly logistically complicated at the same time. Um, anyway, yeah, he had talked about on that podcast about the first time he tried doing this and they didn't weren't successful with it. And I had messaged him like, hey, if you ever like want to go for it again, keep me in mind. Like it'd be cool to team up for it. Kind of didn't think anything would come of it. And then yeah, that next year, um, we decided to go try it.
You say that so casually. Like, oh, we decided to go
I mean,
try
it kind of was like honestly, I didn't
it.
aside from like being in Yosemite and climbing a bunch, I didn't do much like other prep other than that.
Yeah.
I kind of think the best prep for it is just like being there and climbing on that type of rock a lot and being really comfortable with that.
Yeah. Were you nervous the day before?
For sure. Yeah, Brent is like incredibly dialed with all of his systems and um yeah, like he had the topo like fully annotated of like all these spots that we were gonna like swap gear or like blah blah blah. And I was like, my only goal is like just to not mess this up badly enough that we have to bail. Like, there's no way I'm going to send this. Like, if I can just at least be a good enough partner that we don't have to bail, like, that's all I'm going for here.
Do you typically get nerves? Like, would you get it in gymnastics before big event days? And is nerves something you're familiar with?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I maybe manage it a bit better now than I used to. But
Yeah.
when it comes to like affecting someone else's success, then I like definitely feel it even more.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because climbing can be. Yeah, I've never thought about that perspective of like the range of climbing as an individual sport, but if you go in with a group, which is more unique, I think, in the climbing world,
Yeah.
that's maybe
Yeah,
not
it's
as
like
practiced a mental process.
usually pretty individual, but sometimes on these like multi-pitch or yeah, big wall things, it's like you really play a big role in your partner's success as well.
How um how much work do you put into like picking big wall partners? It feels like it's such a I mean, I don't mean this in like a relationship way, but like an intimate thing to do with someone because you're with each
Yeah, for
other
sure.
for so much and for such a range of emotion.
Yeah, I mean, you're like living in whatever, like 10 square feet with them for
Yeah,
up to 8 days or whatever on the wall.
yeah,
Um, I've been super fortunate with like incredibly good big wall partners. Like the first couple I did were with Will Sharp, who's just an like complete undercover, like total badass crusher. And he's awesome. Like one of the most fun people to hang out on the wall with. Really good, really dialed in. And then Tyler Carrow was another like really good climbing partner, or big wall partner. I guess we haven't actually climbed together that much outside of the one route we did together. Um, and then yeah, Brent Bargon has been my other like main big wall partner. But yeah, I don't know. I joke sometimes about like my tolerance level for people is like would I big wall with them or not?
yeah,
But yeah, I think it makes like a huge difference on the success of the ascent, but also like the enjoyability of it. So
yeah.
yeah, I think choosing a good partner is one of the most important things you can do to set yourself up well.
What is, how do you define success on a climbing trip?
Yeah, good question. I mean, objectively in climbing, like success is sending, clipping the
Sure.
chains without falling, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is an interesting question because it plays into the mental side of things a lot and like how you think about performance and like the value of climbing in your life and all of that. Like, I think in some ways it's okay to just say like success is sending, like we can call it that. We can also look at these other metrics of success of like what if we want to call them like process goals or whatever of like I, made this certain link or I like mentally was really present today and that was my goal or I worked on my footwork or my technique or this clipping position or whatever. Like we can have all these like little mini process goals along the way and those are also measurements of success. um I think it's maybe important to have like hold like both of those at the same time of like being willing to say like yes, my goal is to send this route and to me that is like objective success, but I also have to be okay knowing that I might fail in that objective success. And I have to like maybe have set these other like smaller goals along the way that I can check off as like little mini successes so that I know I am also like learning and growing as a climber, even if I don't meet this like main goal that I have. Yeah. I don't know. I think that's a tricky one. It's something I definitely think about a lot.
Yeah, it makes sense. A progress over perfection mindset.
Yeah, yeah. But also being willing to say like this is the goal and I want to achieve that.
Yeah. How how much of a process do you do for goal setting? Like how intentional are you with if ever you do a climbing trip with establishing those?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of structure my year around like a few major goals basically like okay, like I live in a van, I spend like my life living on the road going rock climbing basically. And I'm a pretty goal oriented person. I really like having an objective and a um I don't know, you can say like purpose for the trip or whatever of like this is my overarching goal and then maybe these are my like 5 mini goals that I also want to try or like side project goals. But yeah, for me I'm like pretty goal oriented where it's like really fun for me to have an objective going into a place or on a trip or whatever.
Yeah. Have you always been that way, or did someone introduce that to you?
I think I've always been that way, but maybe didn't like fully embrace it the first like yeah, several years of like really living on the road and like fully investing in climbing. It was more just like going out for fun and like seeing what I could do. And I think I've
Yeah.
gotten quite a bit more like driven and goal oriented in that time.
Would you describe yourself as a competitive person?
Um, with myself, yeah. Like I've been out of the world of like competitive athletics for quite a long time now. Like when I was in gymnastics, I was, but yeah, I've never like really been competitive with climbing or anything. So I don't know. I haven't really like had that relationship with it, but I'm definitely competitive with myself of like always wanting to strive for being better, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so with climbing, does that manifest in just trying to push harder and harder climbs and do bigger things?
Yeah, I think like kind of the way I think about goal setting is like in terms of progression. So like in whatever discipline it is, like choosing a route that is going to force me to like learn and grow in some way. Yeah, which isn't always necessarily like a harder number grade, but and
Yeah.
maybe it's a different style or a yeah, technique or like way of moving that I am not as skilled at. And it's like, yeah, just trying to like choose things that are going to push me to grow in some way.
Do you remember your first trip to Yosemite?
Yeah,
What was that like being introduced? I mean, it's kind of thought of as the mecca of big wall climbing, right? In the US at least.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, first trip was in like 2019. We just went for like 2 weeks in the summer. I was actually in grad school at the time, for yeah, for sports nutrition stuff. We just went out there for like 2 weeks and I mean I climbed like Astroman was like the biggest thing I did on that trip. And then yeah, it wasn't until like 2 years later that I went back and like um climbed El Cap for the first time and like really had a big season.
Yeah. Were how nervous were you making a transition to big wall climbing?
I
Or
kind of
were there
didn't
nerves at all? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I kind of just like didn't know what I was getting into necessarily. Um like the first big wall I went up was Freerider with Will Sharp and he had been up it previously, so I was like cool, like he knows what he's doing. He like taught me how to set up a portaledge and haul a bag and all of that. And I was kind of just like along for the ride of like, this will be a cool experience. I'll go like support my friend on this objective. Um, but then I was like also sending it. So that was fun. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I kind of just didn't know what I was getting into when I first started doing it. And then I
Yeah.
realized I really liked it.
And what did you like about it that was different than maybe a tradition, like a typical multi-pitch even?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I really enjoy doing it like once or twice a year. It's like I don't want to spend my year big wall climbing.
Sure.
But it is really cool to like have that adventure a couple times a year. And like to me, what's compelling about it is that it requires this like full repertoire of skills. Like you have to be able to execute a boulder problem. You have to have good tri climbing skills. You have to have the endurance of sport climbing. And you
Yep.
also have to have all these like technical skills of hauling a bag and rope management and like all these other logistical skills. And you have to have the mental side of like being able to stay in it multiple days on the wall and perform like at your peak for multiple days. And yeah, I like draw on like the really, I guess like mental reserves there. So I just think it's cool how it like really forces you to draw on like every aspect of skill that you learn as a climber through all these other disciplines and like combine them in one big objective.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Something I'm curious about is for climbing for me is very focusing. And if I'm ever climbing just even like a little multi-pitch, I can't think about anything else other than what I'm doing there. But I wonder with something sustained over multiple days, does that mindset maintain or does like real life start to creep in while you're on the wall?
I think it yeah, maybe a bit of both. It's sort in some ways like kind of feels like you're in this bubble up there where you're like
Yeah,
you can like look out over the valley and like observe what's going on down there, but you feel like somewhat removed from it, both like physically and mentally, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's like pretty easy to stay in it mentally and like be pretty present in that moment. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you're spending like a day waiting out the sun just so you can like try a crux pitch in the shade in the evening, and that like you definitely thoughts start to wander.
Is there a satisfaction or like maybe humor you get from sharing photos of Portaledge and big walling with non-climbing people who are just completely unfamiliar with the fact that you could camp on the side of a wall?
I don't know. I feel like I don't really do that often.
Oh, if I were you, I'd be like,
Yeah.
hey, look at this. Like, look what I did last weekend.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't really do that very often.
Could you talk to me about your history with nutrition and studying? Have you always been interested in health and fueling your body?
Yeah. I mean, I think like growing up in gymnastics, I was in a like also very weight sensitive sport.
Yeah,
Thankfully, I had like really awesome coaches who were not like degrading in any way. Like they were really supportive, really encouraging. Like it was a really healthy environment that I grew up in gymnastics, which isn't like the story for everyone. Um, yeah, but being around that and then transitioning into climbing was like kind of just always immersed in these like really, yeah, like weight sensitive sports, I guess,
yeah.
where it's kind of a big topic of discussion. And I do enjoy like food and cooking and all of that. And then, yeah, kind of realizing there was like this niche within climbing of being able to, yeah, I guess facilitate like interact with individuals and facilitate like a more positive approach to food and fueling and body weight and like kind of it's like really empowering to work with people in that space. And I didn't like even getting it when I like first got into it or like first decided to go study sports nutrition. I didn't even quite realize like how impactful or how powerful of a role that was going to be. And I've
Yeah.
kind of like grown into that over the last few years as I've started doing more.
And sorry, when did you
um,
start to
counseling.
study sports nutrition?
Yeah. Let's see. I
Was
went
that
back.
for college or was that after?
Yeah, I went to college for PT, like physical therapy.
Yep.
Decided not to do that. Then we built the van, or my husband was in grad school for a while, or for like 2 years, 3 years. And I was just working or whatever. And then we built the van and traveled for like a year. And then I decided to go back to school. So that was in like, um, oh gosh, 2019, I think I went back to school. Yeah. So I did like a couple years of prereqs and then 2 years of grad school and then like a year of internship. And then I've been like working on my own for like a year and a half now. So yeah, I don't know. I forget where we were going with that.
No, it's so cool. You were just saying how empowering it is to have that knowledge and be able to help others in the sport.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like a really, really neat way to interact with people and kind of empower them to feel better and have a different perspective.
Yeah. And so do you do could you maybe talk about what that nutrition coaching looks like? Do you do one-on-one work with clients or what's the best way for someone to connect with you on that?
Yeah. I do all like remote video call one-on-one nutrition counseling. And most people would do like a package of like 4 sessions. And easiest way is to either like message me on Instagram or go to my like personal website. And on that website, you can like click through a dietitian form and like contact me through there and yeah, request to work together. So yeah, kind of how that works is like I'll have them fill out like an incoming or like new client questionnaire, which has a bunch of different questions about like current habits around food and goals and athletic goals and everything. And then we do like a intake session, which is like 60 minutes, and then a bunch of follow-up sessions after that.
Yeah, what's maybe the most satisfying part of that job then?
Yeah, I think just like hearing back from people of like, whoa, I made these changes that we talked about, and I was able to do like 2 more burns on my project, and I felt really good, and I had so much energy, and like like feel stronger. I'm able to go to the gym another day of the week or have a 30-minute longer session and like I still have energy and I'm not tired and um just that ability to like train harder and longer and feel better is like so empowering. Like that's what makes you a better climber, right?
Yeah, totally. Is it frustrate you that there's not more nutrition education earlier in our education, just in general in the US?
Yeah, it seems like that would be a really good thing. It's such an interesting like general nutrition education for like your general American population is so different than like a sport nutrition application though.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
good
would
point.
be kind of interesting to see how that would play out of like the way I would counsel like 75% of Americans versus the way I would counsel like the climbers that I work with is super different. So it would
Yeah,
be yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of see how that played out.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, because probably people working with you have some like have a probably higher baseline than maybe an average
Yeah,
American,
different
perhaps.
baseline knowledge, but more so just like totally different needs. Like 75% of Americans are overweight, and I'm not counseling them to like pack carbohydrates around their training session
You
versus like
right.
climbers are like largely not fueling enough. And that's like a totally different conversation that we're having.
Yeah. How do you obtain proper nutrition living in a van for a year? Is that really difficult?
No, I mean, it's basically like taking home with us. Like it's way easier than if I was just traveling and like staying in hotels or whatever. Like I have a fridge and a freezer and a oven and a stove. Like I have everything I need to like basically cook as if I was at home. So
You're pretty good at living like pretty close with people then. I think van life would be tricky.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely tricky with two people. Like it's a pretty small space for two people to live in together.
Yeah.
You really have to, yeah, pretty good at communication skills. But also it encourages you or forces you to be outside doing things so much of the time. So it's not for everyone, but I really enjoy it.
What were some highlights from that 1 year road trip? I don't even call it a road trip, but like that 1 year in the van.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still in the van. Like we've been in the van for like 6.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We like did a year and then I went back to school, but like we were living in the van the whole time. So
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're still in the
Oh,
van.
so you guys are in it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we're fully in it. Um, so lots of highlights.
Oh my gosh. What was the first like week like then?
Um, oh gosh. I don't know, you're kind of still getting used to everything and like figuring out, yeah, I don't know, just how it all works, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
But I mean, the first week you're still in that like totally honeymoon phase of van life of like everything's great, we're on this big adventure.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
Then you
I
settle
imagine
into
the
routines.
freedom of location is super empowering.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why I love it is like I can go wherever the weather's good and yeah, pick a new place whenever I want to. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And one other thing I'd love to pick your brain on is uh, you're really great at sharing photos and videos of your climbing online. You have a big Instagram following. Like, when did you decide to start sharing your climbing journey?
Oh man. Yeah, I guess as I like kind of started to like dip my toes in the world of sponsorship for climbing was when yeah, I don't know, kind of realized I should cultivate the social media side a little bit. I still don't really love doing it. I don't know. There's pros and cons of it, I guess. It's I really enjoy climbing as like to me climbing like is art and it's like really cool to work with photographers and videographers who are artistic people because my mind doesn't work like that at all. So
Hmm.
it's like fun to partner with those people and like kind of showcase like the beauty of climbing.
Yeah.
And then also it's like I don't know, it's pretty cool when I can go like to the gym or to the crag or whatever, and people will talk to me of like, hey, like thanks for posting about that injury or this thing or that thing or whatever. Like it was really
Yeah.
cool to read about that. I'm like, it kind of like blows my mind sometimes that people like actually read what I write because I'm like, oh, this is like a novel. No one's gonna read this. So it kind of like blows my mind a little bit when people are like, "Oh, I read that thing that you wrote, and that was really cool." So there's like, I don't know, there's benefits in that way, I guess. But I'm still like pretty resistant to being like all in on social media.
That's interesting. I mean, I can relate to both those comments where I just love your content and I think the writing you do around your posts is great too. And the videos are really cool to watch. I love the videos.
Thanks.
Yeah, so how do you like if I were to film a climb with you, what's that process look like? Are you guys does the cameraman like Jumar up first? How does that what do the just logistics look like for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on like, um, I guess, is it like a single pitch or a big wall or whatever? Like when we
Yeah.
filmed the that El Nino film, which actually just released like 2 days ago. We the videographer like lived on the wall with us for the entire time that we were up there. So like most of it, we would like whatever try a pitch and like pull up his static rope, and then he would jug it, and then we would like climb the pitch again or jet or like try to red point or whatever. So he was like always able to shoot above us. Sometimes he's shooting from below because if we like onside of the pitch or whatever. Um, but yeah, for those like single pitch climbs like Book of Hate or Cosmic Debris or something like that, it's like I climb it, pull up the rope for the videographer, they jug the rope, and I climb it again.
Hmm. So back to like goal setting earlier, we were talking about climbing goals. You have big goals and then macro and micro goals. It sounds like for trips. Is there a shared sense of um, ambitions for like an online presence?
No, not really. Yeah, no. Um, Definitely not. I don't know, it's
Yeah.
pretty like organic, whatever I end up sharing on there. There's no like agenda with it, I guess.
Will you humor me for a few speed round questions?
Yeah,
Okay. Tea or coffee?
coffee.
Oh, actually,
Decaf.
do you do like pre-workout or anything?
Um, I do take collagen. I think
Yeah.
that has some evidence that it's pretty beneficial. So I do that. And yeah, no, I don't really do like a pre-workout though.
Yeah. And decaf coffee, no caffeine, huh?
Yeah, I recently made the switch to decaf. I'm really bad at sleeping, so trying to do everything I can.
I can relate to that. It's like, how am I bad at this? This is like the one thing I should be good at.
Yeah, yeah.
Cats or dogs?
Cat,
ATC or Gree?
agree for sure.
And do you have any indoor hobbies?
I really enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, or baking. Yeah. And
Is that
then
one of the things you maybe miss in the van is like a big kitchen, or can you still do a pretty mean meal in the van?
yeah, maybe a little bit, but we do pretty well in the van. I mean, we have an oven. I can like bake cookies and stuff.
Oh, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Just last question on mine is like, what's the best way for people to support you
To support me, yeah, I don't know.
or connect with you or
Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool, like, when people, like, who know or recognize me or whatever, like, come up and say hi at the crag or the gym or whatever, and, like, I'm totally open to that. Like, yeah, I'm, like, happy to engage with people and have a conversation. And then, yeah, just the other thing is, like, if you have any interest in nutrition counseling, to reach out through my website.
awesome. Thanks
Yeah.
so much, Amity. This is really, really fun. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for reaching out.
That's this episode of Outliers. Thanks so much to Amity for joining, and thank you for listening. I've linked Amity's socials in the description below. Be sure to hit follow on this podcast for future episodes.